The city sweltered under a relentless sun, the heat pressing down like a physical weight. It seeped into my very core, leaving me bone-tired and irritable. Even the chilled white wine I poured myself offered only a fleeting reprieve stepping into the living room. Here is my infidelity story for you all. I felt the oppressive air suffocate the usual warmth of family, the air conditioner a valiant but futile. Soldier against the summer assault offered only a slip of cool. Comfort at least Angel Detective, our favorite show, promised a brief escape. Carl, my husband, was already settled in his chair, a beer can perpetually in hand, the fifth one. It noted grimly a testament to a long stressful day at work and his growing reliance on alcohol to cope the beers. Seem to be his preferred method of escape, blurring the edges of his frayed temper and widening the chasm between us. Kyle, our 19-year-old son, sprawled on the love seat, his feet on the coffee table. A typical teenage disregard for decorum. He was home for the summer, working long hours at a construction firm. A stark contrast to his college life, his presence usually a source of joy. Felt heavy tonight, adding to the general malath coolness of the living room. Felt like a stark contrast to the furnace outside. I had chosen a light cotton sundress earlier, a wise decision in the daytime scorch, but now the air conditioning felt almost too cold. Goosebumps prickled my arms and legs. I caught sight of Kyle and Carr, their forms, silhouetted against the glow of the television. Kyle so much like his father, in features yet taller and leaner. Possessed a vitality Kyle had lost to middle age, and the steady consumption of beer, a wave of frustration, a bitter taste of disappointment washed over me. I, on the other hand, prided myself on self-care, even nearing 40. I still felt a youthful energy, a vibrancy that the sundress did little to conceal. My gaze fell on Kyle's feet. "Kyle, please take your feet off the table," I said. My voice, sharper than intended, he complied, a mumbled apology trailing. In his wake, the small act of correcting him felt significant, a small assertion of control in a life that increasingly felt out of my grasp. Carl, his voice slightly slurred, announced he'd spilled beer on one end of the love seat. The dampness was evident. Even without the lingering scent of beer, I considered turning the cushion over, but decided against it. Order and cleanliness were important to me. A small battleground in a life that felt increasingly out of my control. Carl's growing laziness and reliance on alcohol were making it harder to maintain the balance. I craved Kyle. Despite his teenage habits often helped with chore. She patted the space beside him on the love seat here. "Mom," he offered, moving over to make room. His thoughtfulness was a balm to my frayed nerves, a small kindness in a day filled with increasing tension. I sat beside him, placing a pillow between me and the damp cushion. The warmth of his leg against mine was unexpected, surprisingly comforting, hissed high, firm and strong, pressed against my own, and a wave of guilt immediately followed the comfort, a stark reminder of the inappropriateness of the situation. This was my son, the show began. Angel the detective was both alluring and relatable. A woman who balanced a professional life with a surprising adventurous streak. Watching her, I felt a pang of longing, a wistful remembrance of a time when Carl and I shared a similar spark, a similar intimacy. The contrast between the vibrant relationship on screen and the coldness that had settled between Carl and me was painful. My gaze drifted back to Carl. His inattentiveness, fueled by his drinking, left me feeling perpetually frustrated and neglected. The relentless hate of the past week only heightened these feelings, turning simmering discontent into outright frustration. The distance between us felt insurmountable, a chasm carved by years of unspoken resentments and unmet needs. the simple act of sharing a comfortable silence, or a moment of genuine connection felt like a relic of the past. The air, conditioning our biting became a distraction. I asked Kyle to turn it down, but he dismissed me with a comment about my light clothing. Kyle, ever considerate, quietly got up and adjusted the thermostat himself. When he turned, I offered him the blanket. His small act of kindness and quiet thoughtfulness were a balm to my fray nerves, offering comfort in the midst of the growing tension. We watched the show, together wrapped in the shared warmth of the blanket. When Kyle remarked on Aang's resemblance to me, Carl only grunted in response, his disinterest palpable, but the comment led to a brief, pleasant exchange between Kyle and me, a rare moment of ease. His words brought fleeting comfort, a reprieve from the growing distance in the room. Still beneath that moment of connection lingered an uncomfortable undercurrent of guilt and apprehension. This was Myson. It was wrong. Angel's actions on screen sparked an unwelcome wave of introspection watching her. I felt a pang of envy mixed with my familiar frustration, the vibrant connection between the characters, their passion and unspoken understanding stood in stark contrast to the cold detachment in my marriage. That intimacy, once familiar, now felt distant and unreachable. A wave of longing overtook me, a desperate yearning for something I had lost, for the connection that Carl and I no longer shared. The air conditioning clicked off, and the room quickly began to warm. The blanket's comfort turned unnecessary, but I remained under it, nestled against Kyle. The warmth of his presence was soothing, a physical sensation that briefly eclipsed the emotional turmoil swirling within me. A tense moment on the show startled me, and I instinctively grabbed Kyle's hand, our fingers intertwining. The gesture sent unexpected warmth through me, a small touch that felt profoundly intimate, an unspoken acknowledgement of the growing connection between us. Kyle rose to fetch another beer, leaving Kyle and me alone in the room. The dampness on the love seat was becoming unbearable. My leg kept slipping into the wet spot. The physical discomfort, a small reflection of the larger disquiet. I felt Kyle noticed my shifting unease and offered a solution. "You can sit on my lap if it's easier," he suggested. Gently I froze, a sharp breath catching in my throat. "No, Kyle," I said quickly, my voice a bit too tight. His suggestion, though well-meaning, felt like a line, too close to being crossed. A boundary I couldn't afford to breach. The consequences loomed heavily. In my mind, a stark reminder of the danger in indulging these blurred lines, yet the persistent discomfort of the wet cushion, the weariness of the day, and the quiet solace of Kyle's presence created a conflicting pull within me. The guilt gwed at me, reminding me of the inherent wrongness of the situation, yet the yearning for connection, for something more, outweighed the rational voice of my conscience. It was a surrender to the unexpected intimacy of the moment, the years of unspoken frustration, the growing distance from KL, the unexpected comfort of Kyle's presence, all conspired to silence my inner voice of caution. The line between mother and son blurred, replaced by a raw primal connection that was both exhilarating and unsettling. I hesitated, then shifted, slightly leaning into his. Warmth, the physical sensation, was both surprising and intensely intimate. It was a transgression, a violation of every societal norm. Yet in that moment it felt profoundly right. His arm, strong and sure, circled around me, holding me close, a stark contrast to the emotional distance that had grown between Carl and me. This unexpected intimacy, this forbidden closeness, was both terrifying and strangely comforting. The years of suppressed desires, the unspoken frustrations, all found An outlet in this unexpected intimacy. I was caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, a prisoner of my own desires, a victim of my own longing, and in the heart of that storm, I found myself surrendering to the unknown, to the forbidden, to the unexpected. Warmth of my son's embrace, the future with its potential consequences, remained a distant concern, overshadowed by the overwhelming intensity of the present. The television's narrative faded into the background, replaced by the intensity of the moment, the unexpected closeness, the unspoken understanding that hung heavy in the air, and in that hushed intimacy, it surrendered his arm tightened around me, a comforting pressure that both soothed and unsettled me. The warmth of his body pressed against mine was intensely intimate, a stark contrast to the emotional distance that had grown between Carl and me, the blanket. Initially a simple shield against the chill, now felt like a conspiratorial accomplice, concealing our closeness, our shared secret. The television's narrative faded into the background, a muted soundtrack to the unfolding intimacy. My mind raced a chaotic clash between ingrained morality and desperate longing. This was wrong, wrong, profoundly wrong. It violated every societal norm, every principle I had ever held dear. The potential consequences loomed, large, casting a shadow over the intoxicating warmth of the moment. The guilt glared at me, a persistent voice of reason, yet the desperate need for connection, for intimacy, for the simple comfort of being held, overpowered my better judgment. Yet beneath the guilt, a different feeling stirred, a desperate yearning for connection, for intimacy, for the kind of closeness I had lost with Carl. The years of his inattentiveness, his increasing reliance on alcohol had left me feeling neglected, unseen, unheard. This unexpected closeness with Kyle, however inappropriate, filled a void I hadn't realized existed. It was a dangerous game, a reckless plunge into the unknown. Yet the allure was too strong to resist his hands. Initially, hesitant, began to explore the curves of my waist, tracing the outline of my ribs, feeling the gentle rise and fall of my breath. The touch was light, exploratory, yet undeniably intimate. It was a silent conversation, a shared understanding that transcended words, the years of suppressed desires, the unspoken frustrations.